Hey everybody, movie reviewer next door here, and I'm back with another review. And this time I saw Retaliation. This is a drama film directed by Ludwig and Paul Shamassian from 2017, and it stars Orlando Bloom, Janet Montgomery, Charlie Creed Miles, and Anne Reed. In this film, Malky is a demolition worker whose life receives a seismic shock when, out drinking with friends at a local pub, he sees a disturbing figure from his past, the man he holds responsible for a traumatic childhood incident. Fueled by anger, Malky sets out on a path of vengeance and discovers that no one can escape the consequences of their sins. So, what did I think of Retaliation? Or Romans? It was another bit of a disappointment, I guess. And I'm gonna have to make this a spoiler review. So, I guess if you were intending on watching the film, go ahead. What I will say is this cover of this Blu-ray and the covers that I've seen online make it look like a revenge movie. It's not. It's not a revenge movie. Um, I'm not just saying that because it's not an action movie. It's not a revenge movie. It is a very kind of dingy, slow burn drama where there's a lot of disturbing sexual shit that is shown in the film. Now, I won't say there's a lot of like full frontal nudity or anything. It's mostly implied sexual assault and implied visually, as in you don't see it, but you know what's happening on screen. So if that doesn't interest you or like that kind of stuff, I can understand. But yeah, just a warning. I wasn't the biggest fan of this film. I gave it a 6 because it's it's not a horrible film, but it also just doesn't have a lot of meat to it. There's barely a story here. And this came about from a short film, so I can understand there not being a lot of story, but I'll go more into that once I get through with the cast. Orlando Bloom plays Malky. Orlando Bloom is an actor I don't mind. I haven't seen him in a ton of things. Uh, Apparently he was in Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. I saw him in what's it called? I've seen Elizabethtown. I remember liking that. He was in Unlocked for a little bit. He's not bad in that. But yeah, like he's not a bad actor. I don't think he's a bad actor. Here I think he is trying, but it just doesn't fully work for him. Um, he's not like painful to watch. None of the acting in this film is painful, but Janet Montgomery plays Emma, his on again, off again girlfriend. She's pretty decent too. She doesn't have a ton of screen time. I'm gonna adjust that. Yeah, now it's blue. Now it doesn't look green anymore. Great. This camera fucking sucks. Um, yeah, Charles Creed Miles plays Paul. He's another guy who's gone through um kind of a tumultuous past kind of thing. He's pretty decent. And Anne Reed plays Malky's mother. I forgot what her name is, but she's good too. But okay, here's the issue. This movie is based on a short film called Romans 12:20, which is a reference to a Bible verse. I have to bring it up because it has to do with the film. If your enemy is hung wait. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink, for by so doing you will heap burning coals on his head. So in a way saying by helping your enemy, you will be fueling them feeling bad for what they did to you, I guess. Maybe I'm misinterpreting that. That doesn't happen in this movie. This movie is called Romans originally. So the reason it has two titles, the reason it has this title and this release came out in 2020, 3 years after the film originally came out. The film originally came out under the title Romans, which is a reference to you know, the original Bible verse and the original short film. And I'm guessing the reason it was repackaged this way was to trick people into thinking this was a revenge movie, which, if that's true, Saban Films and Lionsgate, fuck you. There were probably people who wanted to see Orlando Bloom in a revenge movie, so fuck you. That's pretty shitty. But the main thing I can say is that this, yeah, duh, this film wouldn't have been known at all if possibly as much as it is if it hadn't had the name change. But knowing what's in this movie and what this movie does with the subject matter, it's not like this is a disrespectful movie. It's not a disrespectful movie to people who have been through this type of thing. And I think it goes into some very dark places that most movies wouldn't want to, in a good way. It tries to tell the actual truth about what a lot of sexual assault survivors go through, especially molestation. And it's another kind of hot topic of a priest did this to him, which is a type of story we've been hearing more and more recently. So that is not my issue with this film, is that it's trying to be a more realistic take on the subject matter rather than an action film. But my issue with this film, which ultimately makes me give it a 6, is that there's not really that much to it. Other than yes, I looked at the behind the scenes stuff. Yes, they are trying to be as honest as possible about this type of thing. They are not trying to make a film that'll just be like, oh, action movie. I can understand that. But the issue comes in when you realize that that's all this film has, really. Now, this is kind of the other side of the same coin of films like Taken, where you have well done action, a great leading performance by Liam Neeson. So you've got the action movie side covered, but not the deep dive into human trafficking, which I know most people weren't wanting that. There's a little bit of that, but for the most part, if they did go into that, it would break the pacing. That's kind of what's happening with this, where there's little to no action, but there's kind of a deep dive on what happens to sexual assault victims later in their life, the trauma that they experience, stuff like parents not believing them or saying that never happened to you, not protecting their children. All of that is very compelling, but you need a story. The only story we have is basically what was in the short film, which was, oh, this guy, when he was 12, was molested by this priest, and he sees him at a pub, and then his demons come back. There's not enough story for an hour and a half. I don't know how long the short film was, but I just know that's what the short film was about because they talked about it in the behind the scenes. And to be honest, I kind of wish this had stayed a short film. And again, I'm not trying to devalue what Orlando Bloom does with this material. I think he is trying. I just don't think there is enough story here to, make it through this entire run. Like, literally, it was, yeah, 96 minutes is not a long time for a movie. It isn't. And the fact that it can't even make it through that runtime without feeling like it's lost all of its steam is a bit of an issue. Now, I know there's a lot of people that will be like, oh, it's a slow burn thriller. There are plenty of slow burn thrillers that I love that have more in them happening than this, and actually have a bit more of a climax to them. You have Dragged Across. Two of my favorite Mel Gibson films are uh, slow burn films: Dragged Across Concrete and um, Edge of Darkness. Edge of Darkness, not much Sorry, I'm not flipping y'all off. Edge of Darkness doesn't have a lot happening in it, but you still get some pretty cool moments. Him shooting at the car that's trying to drive towards him after the car killed one of the witnesses, or the guy in the car killed one of the witnesses. Um, you've got the you've got him shooting at the car and then it flying into the water. You've got the entire ending of the film, which is insanely powerful because you've had these characters be built up along the way and you start to realize the stakes. Dragged Across Concrete, the entire last 40-ish minutes of the film being one long showdown that never got boring. And there's been action throughout the film up to that point, even though I wouldn't really consider it an action film, but there was stuff happening to keep you interested along with the building up the characters and everything. With this film, what do you get? You get mostly scenes of the character either being angry, angsty, and near the end of the film, you get a bunch of monologues where he's talking to a tape recorder saying, I hurt myself. I abused myself. I raped myself. And I'm like, this should hit so much harder, but I barely know anything about the character other than he was raped. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but if you want the audience to care about a character, you have to give them more than just that. It's like those movies where it's like those shows like Ginny and Georgia or 13 Reasons Why, where they make Hannah Baker or Ginny like the most disgusting characters ever. Like they're such fucking assholes. And then, oh, Hannah Baker gets raped. You gotta feel bad for her. She killed herself. Feel bad for her. Ginny gets abused by her stepfather. Feel bad for her, even though she's a little twat. Like, that's not what you do. You don't you can you can make them imperfect, but when literally everything before showing what happens to them to cause like a change in the plot, when everything before that is showing how much of an asshole this person is, then you're doing it wrong. You're creating a very unlikable character that is very hard to redeem, and you can't just redeem a character by saying they've been abused. This character isn't that. He's not a terrible person. It's just that he doesn't know how to deal with his abuse and everything, and he ends up taking it out on other people, which is believable. Um, as I do know people who have gone through that. But again, I barely know anything about this character in the film itself. I barely know what, like, other than his name and that he's lashes out at people, I barely know anything about this character, and that's a big issue with a film like this, where you're trying to have this deep message about grief and, well, not grief, but coming to terms with being abused and your past coming back to haunt you. Those are big themes that you're wrestling with, and if done wrong, can turn into a very uninspired and at times very misjudged film. And I think this is kind of a little bit of that. But I do want to talk about the ending. Now, with a film like this that's saying again, like I've said, spoiler review, um with a film like this, you're expecting some type of revenge. Like the cover says, revenge is hell. Um you get a scene. This is one of the best scenes of the film, along with the ending scene, because while I don't think the film itself in the middle has much of anything resembling a story, there are still bits where I'm like, okay, there is some genuine pathos here, and I can feel something. And it's our main character Malky going to a confession booth, talking to the priest that molested him, talking about exactly what the priest did, and the priest is trying to get away, and he says, "Set the fuck down." And I genuinely did feel something in the scene, and then he says, "I forgive you." Now, I understand this film's trying to be realistic. It's not just gonna be, oh, he's gonna beat him in the fucking head until his head fucking pops. But that's kind of my issue with films like this because of what the guy did, literally raping this guy, and that's it. He just forgives him after all of the pain it has caused him, decades of pain that this man will never fully, he will never fully repent in the eyes of the law or in the eyes of normal people for what he did. And he just walks away basically after shaking his hand or something, which I was like, okay. And I was hoping this wasn't how the film ended, and it wasn't. It then cuts to the priest at a birthday party for his niece, I think, and who we saw earlier in the film when the main character was going to hit him in the head with a hammer. Um, but afterwards, he walks into an empty field, strips naked, covers himself in gasoline, and lights himself on fire until he's dead. And then that's how the film ends. And I do think that kind of ending could have worked a bit better, definitely, if I knew more about either character. I know literally nothing about the priest. I don't know the priest's name. Everywhere he's credited as just priest, which I think is a bit of a mistake. I know they're trying to be like, make it in a way where rape survivors can watch the film and feel something too, but I don't feel like they will because this film tries a bit too hard to reach everybody, while I wish they had made it a bit more personal. And while that would have made it less successful, which it already didn't make a ton of money from what I know, I feel like it would have been more effective. Because when you do a film like this, if you make a film like this super high budget, you're not going to hit every beat that you should with this type of film. You're going to leave stuff out because it's going to be too uncomfortable for certain people. And I can completely understand you being uncomfortable, excuse me, with this film. But still, that's the most I can say about it, is that it's okay. And again, while the ending is effective, it's not, a good ending can't fix an entire film. But yeah, that was my review of Retaliation, or Romans. If you've seen the film, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. If you have any recommendations, put those down there as well. And movie reviewer next door, out.